Hey folks, Happy New Year and welcome to another episode of Plan A Conversations. Listen folks, how has your New Year's been? How was your holiday? As you all know, I was in Houston, Texas visiting my family and cut my trip a little bit short so that I can get back home to New York City as the COVID cases were just spiking out of control. So glad to be back with you all. The last episode, we paid tribute to Bell Hooks, the late Bell Hooks, who died just short of Christmas last year. And now this week, we are saying farewell to two icons, Betty White, and just this morning, today, the iconic Sidney Poitier, who was the first African-American to win Best Actor as an Oscar, for an Oscar. And I can't tell you how, losing both of those people have been really something that was devastating, for me, especially Sidney Poitier, growing up and watching all of his plays and watching him just ascend as an African-American male in the public eye and entertainment. And so we send peace to their families and thank you so much for the legacy that they left. And so listen, you are probably seeing that we have a new setup here and a new theme music. And so it's One Life. Always want to give our musician a shout out. The content creator of Deep House Music is Tube Racker. He's located in Madrid, Spain. So check him out, One Life. And it's just for our podcast. So excited to have that. So listen, folks, for the people who are tuning in visually, the gentleman that you are seeing on our screen, and for our audio folks, the voice you're about to hear is none other than a new friend in my life, Peter Giorgi, who is the CMO of Equinox. And we just got introduced to each other not too long ago. But welcome, Peter, to the show. So good to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
Yeah. And so listen, Peter, we could talk at odds about, you and your role as a CMO at Equinox. But I have to say, with the introduction that was given to me and you, we talked probably 40 minutes about life.
Yes.
And about about all of the things that were happening, in the world. And so my first question to you out the gate is, how does Peter define his purpose and call in the world?
Oh my gosh, that's what we're starting with? That is the first question?
Why not?
That's so tough. I think if we're talking about my personal purpose.
Yes.
And oddly, I would say actually my personal purpose and my professional purposes sort of merged in some ways. One now serves the other. And a lot of that is because of being a father. I think in my career before fatherhood, I would have said my professional purpose was just to pursue the next stage, the next step, the next level of recognition. Whatever was coming up was always kind of what I was chasing. So by nature, I'm sort of highly dissatisfied with whatever I have the moment I have it. Meaning I always want, once I've achieved it, it ceases to become very valuable. And then I just want the next thing. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And then after becoming a father, that changes. And I've often said I find my work in some ways less meaningful, but more significant. So I don't just define myself through work anymore. Work is a means of providing and, of providing financially, but also providing lessons for my son as far as, why we do what we do and how we do it and the kind of approach we take to things and dedication. And so I guess the simplest answer to your question is I'm just trying to be the best father I can every day.
Yeah.
And that generally leads me to try to be the best, leader I can every day, try to be the best example, and to grow as much as I can. Right. I guess one of the things I figured out is I still make a lot of mistakes.
Right.
And, especially with my son, owning up to those, I find it really freeing and really, just sort of enlightening to sit down with him and say, dad's not perfect. And here's why dad just did that.
Yeah.
Is that okay? And he'll say, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, okay. And I often introduce him as the guy I work for. I mean that. But
Yeah. What happens, because I hear this a lot, especially people on the podcast, is when they have children, what their pursuits were, something drastically shifts and happen. As someone who doesn't have children, what is it that literally is that, I don't know if it's an existential thing or if it's a spiritual thing. What is it that happened, or what did you go through?
such another great question. I've sort of described becoming. I think becoming a parent is it's the only thing in life I've experienced where everything you've heard about it is true. So everything you heard
Mm,
about how joyful it is real, and everything you've heard about how hard it is, that's real too. The good and the
yeah.
bad, it's both 100% accurate.
Right.
Um, but for me, what happened is it was almost like, you know, we feel like we have a certain capacity for love and for dedication,
Mm,
and that we understand what those limitations are. And this is just my experience, but I realized that I wasn't even close to understanding my capacity for those things.
wow.
And so it was like, I described it to someone once as like growing up in a home for 30 years and then discovering that, there's a secret elevator to a basement, and down there is Disneyland. It's like your own private Disney World. And like, so you've just grown up assuming that you understand this place that you live in and that you inhabit every day, but actually there's like so much more there.
Hmm.
And that's just my experience of it. Was it just reframed, how I look at life. And then, uh, you know, starting to co-parent was another moment for me of like real personal growth. Um, and learning how to be a lot more present in those moments, because at that point those moments became less frequent. So I also recognize it was easy to it's very easy to take your family for granted if they're there all the time.
Right.
And if
Right.
now your son will be there 50% of the time, you another switch goes off that and it allows you to just focus all of your attention instead of being distracted. So for me, it's just been an education. It continues to be in like who I am and why I do what I do, and yeah, it's just very enlightening. And I'm never good at it. I do the best that I can, but I
Yeah.
know I'm always. I know he's going to be in therapy about something I did, even though I tried to do it right. Right? Like, I think parenting's like golf. Like most people are bad at it, but it doesn't stop us from doing it. It's really hard.
And
Really
and
hard.
so, do I have your permission to tell how we met?
Yeah, of
Is
course.
that
Yeah, I think
yeah?
it's the most
Okay.
interesting thing.
So all my podcast listeners know that I meet people in the subway, at the airport, introduction, or some kind of random, intro, and this is nothing light of that. So, Peter's ex-wife, Liddy, is now married to one of my friends that I went to undergrad with, Rob. I actually officiated their wedding not too long ago. And through that conversation, me and Liddy and Rob were talking, and they told me who Peter was and what he was doing in the world and things like that. And I had different projects I wanted to run by him. And we ended up having this conversation. Liddy made the introduction, and it just blew my mind that people in this day and age can literally responsibly co-parent and be friends and learn how to, exist, because a lot of that is not it's not typical. And even you, and when I was talking to you originally, you said, but it's just kind of how. No, it's not typical. And so literally making that introduction as wonderfully as Liddy did, I was telling another friend this, and they're like, wait a minute. And the ex-wife made the intro to the ex-husband, and I said, it's the thing. How have you all been able to navigate that world? And I think it's important for our listeners to learn.
Well, first of all, you need to talk to your friend Rob because he was outside shoveling the snow in shorts today. So you need to have a conversation with him.
That is so Rob. That is so Rob. Another fun fact, I was Rob's RA in undergrad, so this makes perfect sense.
It was Maximum, Michigan for sure, outside in
Definitely.
shorts and snow boots. The whole look. Um, how do we? You know, I think a lot of the way that people do this typically, and I know, like from my experience, I think probably Lydia would say the same thing. Anytime that you separate from somebody, especially if you have a child and you're married, it's not a positive experience. I don't know who, but Gwyneth Paltrow could have a positive experience separating from somebody. It's very hard. It's very emotionally fraught. Um, but I think the moment that you let go of like anger and the negativity and the sense that you failed, because it's natural to feel like you failed when something ends. You let go of all of that, and frankly, you just let go of your ego, and you allow, your son or your daughter to be first. If you reframe your thinking around what's best for them instead of what makes you feel good, because you really like to hold on to these feelings of negativity that give you purpose, you just put them first. Everything's really easy. Um, and I think uh, there's a benefit to finding other people who share that mindset, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that to us, my son's family includes Robert's daughter and Robert and Liddy, and that's his family. That's his world, right? Um, and so it just becomes kind of natural. You just have to take yourself out of it a little bit.
Yeah. Take yourself out of it. And so then now, Peter, we've been going through the pandemic for a long period of time. You've had these growth experiences both in your personal and your professional life. How does this influence the way that you're leading at Equinox?
Oh, with a lot more empathy. I mean, a lot more empathy. Um, and there's that old sort of aphorism or whatever about being gentle with people because you don't know what battle they're waging or what they're struggling with, right? And I think that becomes even more true at times like these because we don't know about childcare situations and train schedules being different, so the commute is harder, and two people trying to use the same internet connection while their three kids are also doing school at home. We've I think that it's it, it's recent, but it feels long ago. The way that we used to do things, it was really easy to compartmentalize, and you just saw a person who worked for you or with you as this person in the office,
Yeah.
separate and totally distant from like who they are as a human being.
Hmm.
And in some ways it's easier to manage like that because you're just managing productivity and hours and workflow. And so you don't have to think of a person as a person. You just think of them as productivity. And it's really hard to do that now because you see their home. You hear their dog and you hear their kids. And one of the benefits to me is that people are a lot more open about sharing their personal lives. You start to realize that people are a lot more complex than just what they do from 8 to 6.
Right.
They have there's other things that make them that fulfill them or that they're dedicated to or that they're struggling with.
Mhm.
So, I think I've just become a bit more flexible, a bit more understanding, empathetic, trying to be a better listener. I struggle with that because I'm reasonably good at talking. And so it's hard for me to listen sometimes. So I've tried
Uh-huh.
to really work on that and stop talking.
Uh-huh.
Um,
When you say it's hard for you to listen, how so? What do you mean?
I have a tendency to just fill space,
Hmm.
and it's fairly easy for me to fill space with words.
Mhm.
I like a lot of things, so I can just talk about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, and I tend to very naturally, if you tell me about an experience you had that was positive or negative, I tend to respond to that or to empathize with that by telling you about something that happened in my life that was sort of similar so that we can bond over that experience.
Hmm.
But I've sort of realized not everybody takes it as a positive thing.
Right.
And so that's like, we have these little moments of growth where I recognize some people think that or the interpretation can be I'm trying to make it about me
Yeah.
rather than keeping it about them. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, you know what? At my age, it's really cool to keep learning stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to learn to be a better listener in all of this.
Yeah. And speaking of being a better listener, as you took this job, because a lot of our podcast listeners are trying to figure out how to merge their purpose between their career, their personal life, as well as to fulfill who they are in their relationships as well. How do you listen for you in particular of knowing when the right opportunity is best for you? How did you discover that in this particular role that you're in?
It's a really tough judgment to make.
Hmm.
Um, Especially when you're looking for jobs or you're looking for your next step in your career. You don't ever get a full picture, right? You're about to make, by definition, you're about to make a life-changing decision based on 5% of what you could possibly know, right?
Yeah.
You think about a relationship. You start by talking, you go on a couple of dates, you go on some longer dates, you maybe take a weekend away, and it's very, very gradual until you make really significant commitment. You have an opportunity to learn a lot. And the process of looking for a job is so different because there's some outreach from a recruiter, it's a couple conversations, you maybe talk to somebody for an hour,
Mhm.
or you talk to 10 people for an hour. But none of that is going to be anywhere close to what it's like day to day in that organization. You get
True.
a sliver of how it will be. And so to me, there's always, I look at sort of what could happen in the best case and what could happen in the worst case.
Hmm.
What is the best thing that could happen? What's the worst thing that could happen? What's sort of more likely to happen in the middle? What am I going to, how will I grow? How will I struggle? Um, and then it sort of comes down to a gut. Like having considered all those things for me, then it just comes down to a sort of gut response of, is this where I want to be? Um, Something a good friend told me a long time ago that I always think about is you never want to run from something. You want to go to something. I
Hmm.
think it's a bad idea generally to leave a job because you hate it to just take on something new.
Oh,
You generally want to find something that's actually attractive to you. Most jobs are hard. They're going to have their ups and downs.
right.
Um, and I think the idea of, you know, merging purpose and thinking about, I guess the other thing I was going to say is no job's perfect that I've encountered yet.
Amen.
And so I'll often say that you need to find those moments or opportunities or areas of focus that will make the job you have the job you want.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was in global marketing at Airbnb at a time when that company was super ascendant, being written about all the time. And my move after that was to be the chief marketing officer at a cruise line. And if you're somebody who's very caught up in, um, in press and buzz and those sorts of things, you would think, I don't really understand that move or why you would make it.
Right.
And to me, it was about challenging myself and to think, well, how do I apply what I learned here to this place where nobody's expecting it,
Right.
right? So when I talk to young marketers and they say, I'd love to work at Nike, so would everybody else.
Hmm.
So like one, so would everybody else. And two, well, first of all, they're great. They're like the best marketer of all time, probably. So
Just saying.
I understand the instinct, right? Of course, that's amazing. But is that the place where you're really going to get to leave your fingerprints on things? If that's what you want.
Mm. Hmm.
If your goal is to learn how that company does the best marketing in the history of advertising, and what that system is like, and how to take advantage of the way that they tap into culture, then very good place to go. If your goal is to like really shape something and mold it and like take part and build it from scratch, not a really good place to go. you know um, and so it's interesting that, to me, a lot of people in marketing who aspire to be at some of these other places, well, those stories have already been written.
Mhm.
And if that's what if that's what you want to do, and they're brilliant marketers, but that's a different opportunity than shaping something and being part of something that's a bit, um, more nascent. So I think in some ways I try to look at a micro level, how do I make this the job that I want? Even if it's not perfect for me. I don't know what my perfect job would be. But how do I make it what I want? How do I like leave better than when I started? And at a high level, um, thinking about what it is that you want to get from that stage of your career. I was so just like overjoyed to be joining a place like Equinox that has. So to me, it was like great culture, world class product, really strong brand, desire for creativity and provocation, and like Equinox ticks all of those boxes, right? Um, and then when you meet with the people, they're just, frankly, here's a big litmus test for me. When you see people using the product, how happy are they, right? And so when I was at Celebrity Cruises, as part of that process, I went on a ship, and I actually brought Milo with me. He was like 2 years old or something.
Mhm.
And so when you walk in and you see people getting on a cruise, I don't know if you've been on a cruise, but
One.
right, you told me that. So people getting on the cruise ship the day that the cruise starts is the best day of their whole year.
It
They
is.
have been looking forward to it. If you've never seen a bunch of people get on a ship and be handed a glass of champagne, like,
Seriously.
they're so happy, right?
Yeah.
They're in awe of this thing that they get to sail around the world on. And so for me, seeing that, I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, I get this. I understand it. And I had the same experience, when I went to the Equinox in Hudson Yards. I just think, all right, I
It's
get this.
gorgeous.
This
Yeah.
is, this is beautiful. And
Right.
by the way, those people are beautiful, and they're having a really good time, and they seem really excited by this. And you can tell this is their hour today that they get to
Hmm.
themselves.
Mhm.
Um, so at Celebrity, I would often say we sell like the best week of somebody's year. That's what we're selling them. Not a
Mhm.
trip, it's the best week of their year. And at Equinox, I feel like we're giving somebody their hour in the day that's
Hmm.
just for them. Their hour it's not for their boss, it's not for their spouse, it's not for their kids, it's not for their doctor, their lawyer, or
Yeah.
whatever. It's for them. They go in and they get to just be about them.
And what I'm hearing you say is what's important to you. It seems like two things: creating a legacy at a company, to leave a legacy behind, and as well as a level of having human connection rewarded in some kind of way.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I would never have put
Yeah.
it that way, but that's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is, and I think so many people, to your point, myself included in the past, we think of these big organizations that we want to be a part of, and sometimes it really is the question of what is it that you want to create from scratch and potentially leave behind. Which I'm that latter, person. Just shifting gears over to marketing in general. I describe marketing myself as these creatives who has this spiritual lens that's able to see through the soul of what consumers want.
Mm.
How do you define marketing, and how did you even get involved in
Oof.
marketing?
I'll answer the second question first, if that's
Okay,
okay. That has an easy
please.
answer. I was about to graduate from university, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I went into university thinking that I wanted to be a psychologist, and in year two,
I could so see that.
yeah, but I just realized like I found it very unsatisfying. The deeper I got into it, the more I recognized this isn't for me, and the people who are going to be good at this, we're not alike, and so I need to not do this. And and then I changed majors, and I majored in English literature, and that doesn't have a super defined career path other than nothing really. Maybe being an English professor, which I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And I guess at a point I recognized what I wanted to do was something that had a creative lens and a creative output, but was also sort of involved in like business and was more like predictable. I wanted to do, frankly, I would say I want to do something creative and not starve. That's a better way of putting it. It's not like,
Understood.
I wanted to make a living, but I also wanted to do something with people like me that, was maybe not as well defined, where we're trying to solve interesting problems. And I ended up becoming an intern for 3 months at an ad agency in Toronto that's no longer around. And kind of the rest is history. I just started from there, and then I'd be lying if I said I had a plan. I just
But what called you? What called you to marketing? What was that interest?
I feel kind of fortunate that I grew up at a time when I think marketing was really simple and in some ways at its best. I feel like it was a golden age, that 80s, early 90s. There was no social media, there was no internet, there were no cell phones, and so if you wanted to market a brand, you basically did it on TV or maybe a magazine. That was really it. You had billboards, you had print, and you had television. And so we were kind of in that golden age of, I remember sitting down like it was an appointment with my family to watch a Pepsi commercial because Michael Jackson was in it, and I think it was like 2 minutes long. Like that's how important marketing was in those moments of like, oh, we got to sit down and watch this commercial that, Pepsi did with Michael Jackson. Like it was a pivotal thing. And you had those Michael Jordan Gatorade ads, you had these great Volkswagen ads, and you had all of that great Nike work and great Apple work. And I mean, they stand up. I mean, nobody's beaten some of those ads. Like we have more outlets now. We have more ways to target people. We have a lot of data, and like, so the mechanics of marketing are vastly more developed in terms of, segmentation and personalization, all those things. But I mean, you go back and watch that Nike Revolution spot with the Beatles, and I remember how I felt when I couldn't believe that a Beatles song was in an ad. First of all, that was mind blowing. It never really happened. Or those Michael Jackson spots, or the production value is just off the charts, or the Nike ads with Spike Lee.
Oh, amazing.
They're amazing.
Phenomenal.
I mean, yeah, they're and so I guess I was just drawn to the fact that you could sort of create culture like on behalf of a business. That was really cool to me.
Yeah.
And that then you got to come up with ideas that somebody else paid to get made, and then they would just be on TV. That just sounded really cool to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it was a thing of wanting to just create something and having no understanding of what that meant, truly. I mean, I walked into the first ad agency I interned at, and I knew nothing.
Right.
And I'm not sure I knew much more when I don't know if I know any more now. Like that's kind of the benefit of being at a place like that, is you become more proficient in dealing with ambiguity. You become more at peace with like staring at a blank page and just thinking, well, we'll figure it out. Like the best thing anyone can tell me is no one's ever done this before. Because I just think, well, then we know the most. Like we know as much as anybody in the world about doing this thing because nobody's tried it. So isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
That like the people in this room are going to be the ones who figure it out instead of nobody's done this before. Well, it doesn't mean
Right.
it's impossible. It just means that no one's tried. Like, okay, so let's go.
And how does that feel shaping and forming culture? I mean, like that to me is just like one of the greatest gifts that one could have or be a part of.
I'm not sure that brands do that anymore in commercials. I think it's a lot like think about the golden age of MTV, right? Now MTV I think is like 60% ridiculousness, and they no band breaks on MTV anymore. They used to. And I think that now what shapes culture is product more so than commercials or marketing necessarily. I think, you know, um, Virgil was a master at this kind of stuff, right? Of like creating product that changed culture and created cultures and fueled cultures. And then that product creates new products because then you get Grailed and StockX and all of these other things to fuel the community that's been built around this product, right? Um, but I can't really think of, maybe I'm just old and grumpy. I can't think of marketing that's hit the way that some of those spots or those really brilliant campaigns did way back when. And maybe it's just because now, those campaigns are happening on TikTok and they're not experienced the same way at scale as they used to be. Um, or because we're just, the effect of those campaigns is so much shorter now. If you think about, the Peloton ad that ran a couple weeks ago, it was out for 2 days,
Right.
not 12 weeks. It was out for 2 days. It was like one and done. And that never would have happened. Yeah, so I'm not sure that they do shape culture. I tend to think now that marketing is there in service of the product. That bad marketing used
I
to
was
try
just
to
gonna ask
convince
you.
you. So, like, I think bad marketing tries to convince you to buy a bad product. When the product's really great, that's the marketing. I mean, Tesla's a great example of this, where I don't want to say it sells itself, but you can drive 400, you can charge it in your garage, drive 400 miles, and it's faster than a Porsche 911. You don't really need to say much else about that.
Yeah.
Really cool. Like, and I feel similarly about Equinox as much as, when you use the product, it really doesn't require a lot of explanation. Um, So I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm really trying to think of like what is the last thing that I saw where I thought that's incredible. I wish I'd done that. And we experienced it. I think that's what's missing for me versus where, the golden era for me
Right.
is that we don't experience these things at scale as a shared culture, right? We're
Is
not
that a
all
bad thing? Is that something that you want to get back to?
Well, I think it's why like people still get so excited about the Super Bowl because we know we're all going to watch those ads together,
Right.
right? And it doesn't really happen anymore. Like if this was 1965 and you asked me to advertise to 30% of the American public, I'd say, well, we got NBC, and that would reach 30% of people. There were three channels, right? That's like very, very simple. And so, because of the limitations, you had scale and a shared experience built in. And I think that's part of why we get so worked up about the Super Bowl ads.
Right.
We're all going to see them together. We're all going to sit down. We don't have any more of those moments like, there's no moon landing that we're all watching together around our TVs. There's no shuttle launch where they roll the television into the classroom. We all sit there and we look at it together. We're all like, it's so fragmented. And I think that's probably why nothing hits the same way anymore.
And just speaking of fragmented, you and I spoke at length just about like the divide in, the world in general. And now my mind is drawing a parallel and wondering if a big part of that is we don't have these shared experiences any longer, like in the marketing storytelling aspect where we all can see and identify something together.
I think that's right. And I think another aspect, or what contributes to that, is also that our devices and our search engines and our social media networks are designed to keep us engaged. And and so we're essentially fed things that these algorithms know we will like. And so you're fed things that you agree with. And so if you strongly dislike a group of people, you will likely get information telling you about how that group of people is really bad. Um, and I think that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy probably leads to like more division. Um, and for me, it's why when you have moments of not necessarily unity, but some like a concert to me is really interesting because you know that there are people there from various walks of life with various political beliefs and religious beliefs and socioeconomic situations, and but you all know the words, and so you all sing along, and like
So true.
that fulfills something in us. Like we want that, right?
More of that. Yeah.
We're actually built to be part of those tribes or gatherings. Makes us feel good, right? It's why these brains that we walk around with were not built for podcasts and Facebook and iPhones. They were built for us to survive with our people in a group, like in a cave. That's what they're. It's like we have these like very primitive brains that are now being exposed to all these things that are super modern, and that's why like when you break up with somebody, it feels really bad because part of your brain is telling you you are going to die alone. You are in danger. You're by yourself. This is no good. But the reality is, you're not in danger. You're fine. You're okay. Um, and so I think there's like, we become more isolated, and then it can make some of those communal moments more important. But we lack a lot of that.
Yeah, but to, it, it seems to me, just hearing you speak and get especially that concert reference, marketing may be the unsung hero that potentially can bring us all together in a brand new way.
So I get really worked up when marketers take themselves too seriously. Well, like, but I actually do think that there's some truth to that. That but I'm actually like really disappointed personally in the industry and in advertising because they really haven't been able, through a lot of this division over the last few years, they really haven't been able to assert themselves in a way that feels positive. No, we haven't been able to explain to people at scale um, why vaccination is good, and so we have this divide in something that was never divisive before in the history of, you can go back to the polio vaccine, and people were lining up to get it, and they didn't know what was in it. There were no papers published. They just knew that it was. First of all, you had trust in institutions, and that's sort of eroded. Um, but I think you also had more of a sense of shared responsibility. And I don't think there's been any really great work that's been able to bridge that gap or that divide. So in some ways, I'm kind of disappointed that we haven't, you know, been able to do more as an industry. Because if you look back, so you look at moments of austerity, like say, look at all the great posters and out of home work from World War II, where you were convincing people that they should, buy war bonds or bring in their cans because we were going to turn those into whatever. Or don't use, don't turn your lights on at night because planes will see. Like And so we were able to convince people at scale to sacrifice something. We were able to convince them at scale to sacrifice their own personal comforts and change their behavior for a greater good. And we haven't been able to do that again, not right now.
So are you saying that marketing has lost a sense of purpose?
I think there's still purpose, but I think it's become harder to find a message that resonates across so many different cultures.
Got it.
Um, and I think there's also just less, I have books at my office on, best ads of the 50s, 60s, 70s. There's like this great series of books. I forget who makes them. I wish I could remember. I think it's Taschen. And you look at those early ads, and they were just so much of what was underlying the way that they spoke to people back then was this inherent belief that people just trusted institutions and companies. We just, 4 out of 5 doctors smoke blank. Like, what? So you look at it now and you're like, are you insane? But we would say that and people believed it. And so we've eroded belief in those companies. We've eroded belief in like cultural institutions. And so you're left with a group of people who distrust, like, for a reason.
Right.
And I think that's why you get, it was enough in the 80s just for Volvo to say their cars were safe.
Mm-hmm.
But now if you're advertising a car and you want to convince someone that it's safe, you have to say it's got a 5-star safety rating and it was rated this, and this from all these third parties so that I'll believe you. Otherwise, I will not believe you. Just because you say it's safe,
Right.
and it's safe doesn't mean I'm going to strap my child into it.
Right.
I don't know. So I think a lot of it is just that so much has changed that the way that marketing speaks to culture by definition is different. It impacts culture differently than it did back then. I think things like design, product, and community are a lot more relevant or valuable right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who's a young marketer who wants to take on some of these things that you're speaking about? They see there is a gap that no one has fulfilled. They see they can become the disruptor to kind of step in to do that. Where would you advise them to start or go?
So I always think about how I started. And when I started, there were, awards books that like would be in an art director's office, and the books would come out and you'd have to like get the book to see what was good in marketing back then. And if there were award shows, you couldn't go because it was expensive and it was like in France or something. And now, if you're a young aspiring marketer, you can read case studies and you can look at the last 30 years of winners from Cannes and the last 30 years of winners from the One Show and the DNAD show. And you can find an ad that you liked and then see who directed it. And then go to their reel and see everything else they directed. And then see who the cinematographer was and look at their reel. What else did they do? What films they do? Watch those films. Who was the set decorator in this thing? Look that up. Right. So I guess the main thing to me is like be a little fanatical about it and like unpack all of it because it's there. We have all of this wonderful technology now, right? And you can go in and read the case studies and watch the case study videos and look at the work. And then, find out who else is who's new and up and coming and doing things that are interesting. When I was starting out, you had to get a DVD from, a production company and look at their director reels. And now you just go on, whatever production companies, then you just look at all of their directors. You just start watching commercials. You just start watching video. You just start to understand what's what. I also think if you're talking specifically about people, in the US, look at other countries to see how they're,
Good one.
what the trends in design are and language. And I mean, it's very easy here to just be insular, but if you look at some of the best marketing in the world, comes out of Asia. Um, Incredibly different perspective in places like the UK, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at global work to see what they're doing and how they're thinking is really important. And then I think it's also super important to recognize that your life experience is not universal.
Whew.
It's
Say that one more time for the folks in the front and the back.
because it's like, so it's easy, especially if you are a person who lacks color, like I am. It's really easy to assume that my life experience
Yeah.
is universal, and that when you talk about a target audience, it's easy to conceptualize of it a certain way, but like that's not the truth. And that's a place where I think marketers have a huge responsibility, is to be more representative and inclusive, so overused, but it's so I think it is more just about like reality and representation, right? Don't I wouldn't think about necessarily a need to be inclusive as if it's an obligation. It's like, no,
Right.
that will make your thinking better. That will make your work better. Um, it will make your strategy stronger if you understand people's experiences. And if your audience isn't, if the people you're talking to are not middle-aged white folks in the suburbs, then why are you thinking about them? Why are you worried about them? That is not, I mean, in America in the last 100 years, that is not where culture comes from. Culture
No.
comes from middle-aged white people in the suburbs. They consume it, but they don't create it. It comes from someplace else. And so I guess that's another thing I would say is like, think about where culture is coming from right now. And it always comes from marginalized communities. I don't know about if all, I might be overstating that, but I think most of the great art or most of the great design, most of the great cultural movements, if you think about jazz, house music, hip hop, forms of dance, all kinds of like those come from marginalized communities, right? And then they get adopted. But I mean, I don't know. Other than casseroles, what have middle class white people done in America? I don't know.
And I
Not
think this
much.
is it's such an important conversation. And you and I were talking about this a little bit when we first connected. But tell our audience, because I think this is a really good point, especially for other marketers to get. How are you approaching that with Equinox, with also your marketing and the people that you hire?
So with hiring, I'm a fan of just bringing in like the best person for the job, right? That's easy. We just hire the smartest person. But then we also ask ourselves about like, where are we recruiting from? How do we write the job description? What are the questions we're asking? What's the, is this like, are we making a decision here based on like a process and an experience that is relatable and relevant to everybody? It's really not easy. But we're trying to build a team. I think I said this to you, like, I'm just trying to build a team that looks like America and like
You
recognize
did, yeah.
what that is, right? Um, and then realizing that we just have more work to do. And like, and I actually think it's okay to say we haven't done enough and we need to do more.
Right.
Um, Versus saying, or feeling like you're being attacked because someone would say to you, I don't believe that your department is diverse enough. Well, yeah, you might be right. But diversity is not like a switch that we can flip, right? It's not easy. And so I think it's just reminding ourselves of not just that we want the department to feel like home to people and to feel like a group of folks that they actually would like to spend, hours a day with solving problems. So it's not just that, but to think, how do we want this place to look in 5 years? Where are these people going to be? What is their opportunity for advancement? How do we make sure that cultures aren't just represented, at a certain level in the organization, that like we're really building something that will be stronger because of these different perspectives. And it's always a very delicate conversation. Um, it can, especially, I think if you're not represented in, a minority, they can be tricky to have those conversations, but they get easier the more you have them.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point. Conversation. It takes two people. Like you have to be willing to sit down and to be open to it. Like you're saying, a different experience. And
Right.
also, sometimes it's not going to be a easy conversation. A lot of times it's going to be hard. But knowing that you can come back to it is, I think, what is the uplifting part and which really kind of solves problems. And so, Peter, we're a little bit over time, but I'm curious to ask you this because it's how we started our conversation. What do you think your legacy will be at Equinox? What are you hoping that to be?
Oh gosh, part of me feels like it's just too soon to tell.
And that's okay if it is.
Yeah, I think it sort of is too early to tell. What I hope it is, and like what I aspire to, is that I would like to see. I guess I'd like to see the brand really perceived as a luxury brand, like as that we could have a conversation about great luxury brands, and Equinox would be one that comes up. Not in fitness, I guess. That's probably what it is for me, is that people don't think of it as a fitness company or as a gym, but they think of it as a luxury experience, a luxury hospitality company, a place where they
Yeah.
go to be. And this is what I always say, is it's a place where you go to be the best version of yourself.
Hmm.
Um, where those tools are set up for you.
Hmm.
And I know that and I haven't done it in a while because it was the holidays, but I know that when I go, I am less stressed and I sleep better and I eat better and I drink more water. And it becomes this cycle, right? Of like all the things that you should do to stay healthy. Well, if you take that one step of walking through the door of Equinox and doing a group fitness class, or just spending 30 minutes on a treadmill, all those
Yeah.
other decisions become easier. And so that's sort of what I get excited about, is that these people, our members, are able to find a version of themselves that's hidden right now. They're able to
Ooh,
and find it. Like
that's good.
I really think it's a place that,
Yeah.
so this is my perception of it. I go there to fail. I
Hmm.
go there to push myself until I can't do it anymore.
Hmm.
And the minute it's easy is the minute that the growth stops, right? And so, like, to me, that's a great sort of analogy for life. Is like, if it's simple, if it's easy, you're definitely not growing.
Right.
And so the moment that the class is easy with 20s, I'm picking up 25s. That's the only way that it stays hard.
Yeah. Listen, Peter, you have we've did a dance with your personal, your spiritual
A
and
lot of
professional
ground.
life.
You covered a lot of ground. I told you I like to talk.
Yeah. But this is what I love about this podcast. And this is what I really enjoyed about our first conversation. It was just very real, organic talk. And so, Peter, for folks who actually want to engage you and also want to learn more about Equinox, where can they go and do that?
So I'm at Peter Giorgi on Twitter. I rarely tweet, but I like retweet and like a lot of things. And Equinox.com is our website. That's where we have all the information about what we do. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn like everybody else. That's a great place to find me too.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. Also, one question, because I know someone's going to want to know, what is that smoke that has been going across your screen?
It's incense. It's Norton incense, which is like my favorite incense. And I have that candle that you gave me downstairs in the fireplace mantle, which is wonderful. But is one of the few things I subscribe to. I don't have the box. The box is cool. But every month I get a new delivery from Norton of like various, incense. And it is something that I find to be like very grounding. So it's something I do in my office here. It helps me kind of relax. But that's what that was.
So listen, folks, I've solved the mystery for you because I know you have been wondering. So I want to thank Peter Giorgi for taking time to talk with us today. Of course, you can learn more about me by visiting clayaskwilliams.com. And I'm on all of your favorite social media by the handle of @PlanA with Clay. That's @PlanA with Clay. Remember, folks, Clay's with a K. Thanks for listening. Look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations. Peace, folks.